Just wanted to cover this little piece of news real fast concerning the Israeli annexations. Good afternoon, everyone. I found this on Times of Israel, and I checked it late today, or else I would have found it this morning, but Gantz signals support for unilateral annexation if Palestinians say no forever. Defense minister lays out conditions for backing the extension of Israeli sovereignty over West Bank lands. Acknowledges move could be met with violence. And on this one, I do watch Israel. Probably not as close as I should, but I watch Israel because Israel is God's timepiece to let us know exactly where we are in as the way Dr. Chuck Missler, who had gone home to be with God. I think it was 2018. But he would say that Israel is God's timepiece to show us where we are in history. And it's true, because a revelation was written for a time even ahead of us, where we are now, and it was written nearly 2,000 years ago. So I do keep an eye on Israel, because Israel, even though they are in unbelief, and everything that's happening with the lands of Israel, I do pay attention to it. But I also pay attention to the birth pangs. I pay attention to, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, the earthquakes in diverse places. And diverse places does not mean, oh, there was an earthquake today in such and such a place, and there hasn't been one there in like 20 years. Diverse places is earthquakes absolutely everywhere. And what do we see on the map? When we look at the earthquake map, we see earthquakes absolutely everywhere. But pay attention to the Ring of Fire. We've had some significant activity on the Ring of Fire. But with that, let me go on to the next image and get this video done quick. Defense Minister Benny Gantz on Tuesday signaled he could not back unilateral annexation of West Bank lands, citing persistent refusals by the Palestinians to reach a deal with Israel, while reiterating his demand that the move not endanger Israel's existing peace agreements. We won't continue to wait for the Palestinians. If they say no forever to everything, then we'll be forced to move forward without them, Gantz said in a briefing to military reporters. He described the Palestinians' ongoing rejectionism as their deep cow dung, and said Israel would not get dragged into it. However, he didn't specify a date for when he would support a unilateral move, or whether he would back starting the annexation process next week, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly pledged to do. Under the coalition deal between Netanyahu and Gantz, the premier can begin on July 1st, moving forward with annexing the roughly 30% of West Bank slated for Israel under U.S. President Donald Trump's peace proposal. The proposal, which the Palestinian Authority has rejected out of hand, envisions a Palestinian state in the rest of the territory. Gantz stressed his commitment to ensure Israel remains safe, Jewish and democratic, and economically prosperous, which he said Trump's peace plan could best ensure. If you hear a slight break in between from one image to the next, as I'm recording audio for each image and I'm lining it up, but if you hear a break, it's because of the starting and the stopping of the audio to keep the audio with the image. But the article continues, we need not only manage the conflict, but also shape it. We'll act to minimize as much as possible the risk of the state of Israel as a bilateral state, while safeguarding the security of the state with close deliberation with the U.S. countries of the world, and the Palestinians as much as they want to be part of the discourse, he said. With this, Gantz laid out his conditions for annexation, vowing there would be an organized process in coordination with the Israeli Defense Force and other security services. He indicated he opposed annexing territory with many Palestinians in it, and that any Palestinians in territory would be annexed should be offered equal rights. He stressed the need for maintaining freedom of movement for Palestinians in the West Bank. He said annexation should be coordinated with other relevant players, an apparent reference to Jordan, Egypt, and others in the region. We won't take Palestinians into our territory. We won't harm human rights or the right of movement. We'll work in coordination with regional countries, and we're in contact with them. We won't endanger the peace agreements, he said. Gantz has also said to favor that any annexation take place in the context of some kind of wider offer to the Palestinians, a carrot, along with the stick, according to a Channel 13 report Tuesday night. Peace Now, a settlement watchdog group opposed to annexation, slammed Gantz in response to his comments. After he retreated from his promise to replace Netanyahu, Gantz has turned into his official collaborator. The man who promised to bring peace has volunteered for a project to set alight the Middle East, it said in a statement. Gantz, a former IDF chief of staff, also said during the briefing that he has reviewed with the military potential responses to annexation with the IDF and has been preparing for and acknowledged the move could be met with violence by Palestinians in the West Bank. There is a security challenge in the Judea and Samaria area, and it may be a greater challenge as a result of applying the law if and when that happens, he said, using the biblical names for the West Bank. Israel's security force have been mostly left in the dark about Netanyahu's annexation plans, hampering their ability to plan accordingly. A television report over the weekend, however, said security officials this week will be shown maps of areas the Prime Minister is seeking to annex. According to various Israeli reports, the proposals floated by Netanyahu range from only annexing a small part of the West Bank to a largely symbolic move to extending sovereignty over all settlements and the Jordan Valley. TV News reports TV News reports Tuesday night said Netanyahu is hoping to get White House approval for the first phase of annexation that would include not only one or more of the major settlement blocks, such as you know what? I'm going to leave this link into the link to this site, to this web, to this news article in the description box, because some of these words I'm not even going to try because I will mess them up. I know I will. But also one or more relatively isolated settlements deeper in the West Bank to convey the message that those more isolated settlements would not become part of a future Palestinian entity. A planned second phase of annexation would be more extensive, in line with Netanyahu's pledge to extend Israeli law to all 132 settlements and the Jordan Valley. Political sources close to Netanyahu were quoted on Channel 13 expressing frustration with Gantz and Foreign Minister Gabi. Okay, you're going to have to read that one. For failing to back Netanyahu's annexation plan. Unnamed sources close to the two blue and white party leaders, by contrast, claim Netanyahu has yet to specify exactly what he aims to annex and when, and thus they cannot formulate a firm stance on it. Here's an image of Netanyahu. He's on the left, and he's in a helicopter, and he's with some IDF soldiers, and they're looking over maps, and assuming, and in the news article, this image is there, and it gives a caption underneath, but Netanyahu is the one on the left, and they're looking over maps, and you can see this image when you go up and read the news site. The prospect of unilateral annexation has been condemned internationally, with European and Arab states, as well as senior members of the U.S. Democratic Party, warning the Israeli government against doing so. Netanyahu has said U.S. support for annexation represents a historic opportunity, and the U.S. has indicated that it will not oppose Israeli annexation, but has lately signaled ambivalence about the timing of such a move. Trump's administration officials are expected to hold a decisive meeting this week on whether or not to approve Netanyahu's plan, with a Reuters report Monday saying the White House is considering backing the annexation of only a handful of settlements in the Jerusalem area due to concerns over how a larger action could affect regional ties. Times of Israel staff contributed to this report.